Welcome to Uncopyable Women in Sales. If you're looking for actionable insights and real-world tools to turbocharge your sales starting tomorrow, well, you're in the right place. Your host, Kay Miller, earned the affectionate nickname Muffler Mama when she sold more automotive mufflers than anyone else in the world. In this podcast, Kay will talk to another superstar woman in sales as they reveal uncopyable strategies you can use to rack up more leads, snag dream clients, and take your sales numbers through the roof. Stay tuned and get ready to make more sales and how about this? More money.
Today I am talking with Sara Arnett, who is the owner of Arnett Roofing Company, a family business that she inherited at the very young age of 19. And I read that your dad had been in the business. The business had been going since 1932. And he said, you know what? I'm done. So either we sell this or you take it over. And you said, I can do this. So I would love to hear from your perspective how that unfolded and what made you say I can do it and what that's been like, especially because it's a totally male-dominated industry.
So my parents had a very hands-on approach with raising us. I have two sisters as well. My grandparents are also entrepreneurs, and it kind of followed the model that they set. When we were children, our business was ran out of our home. My mom did the office end. My dad ran everything in the field. So the phone calls came through the office. It was expected that we could professionally answer the phone, take a message, do all those things, communicate things about scheduling, answer questions. That there was no choice about that, and we all enjoyed it. So as I got older, I would go to work with my dad in the summers. I would work on the crew. My parents believe that you're not better than any job that you have in your company. So I started off cleaning up the ground. We had an old asphalt tar kettle. I'd have to get in it in the winter and chip out the asphalt, and that's how I'd make my Christmas money. And I was glad to do it. So that eventually evolved into working on the crew, running a crew, taking over some leadership responsibilities. And then one day my dad just got sick of dealing with employees and said, I'm done. This is it. I'm done. We can close. It doesn't matter. I'm just done. And I thought, you know what? I can do this. I can do every part of this. And if I can't do it, I can figure it out. I want to try it. And that's where we are.
I love that. And I asked you before, where do you think you got that attitude? Is that a natural ability? Is it something that your parents instilled in you? What do you attribute that to?
Both of my parents never gave us an option of I can't do this or maybe that's too hard. No, you'll find a way to do it. My grandparents were the same way. They bought a little country store from my great-great-grandparents, and they just made it work. As a child, my mom would work on equipment. I was expected to work on small engines around the shop. I do brakes. I would learn how to do things. You have to know how to do these things. If you operate this piece of equipment, you need to know it inside out. So there was never anything that we attempted that was a failure. If we couldn't do it, then we would get help and we would still accomplish it. Maybe we wouldn't do it on our own like we originally thought, but that's still a success because you learned how to do it for the next time. So that was just not in vocabulary at all that you can't do this.
So yeah, you were able to figure things out, but being such a part of the business and then being an entrepreneur, those are two totally different things, right?
It was, but also as a kid, as a teenager in high school, when it was time to do taxes, my parents were very open about that. We helped with taxes. We learned how, back then my parents used a record book, and we learned how to color code every check that came in and log it in the book. I knew how to do payroll. Dad's like, oh, you're learning this in math at school and geometry. Let me show you how I use that to measure blueprints. So everything was so integrated. It didn't feel like work or chores. It was just interesting being included in that part of their life, and we enjoyed it. So even though I wasn't an entrepreneur, I kind of was because I had already learned those steps. We would discuss employee relations at the dinner table. Like, okay, here's an issue I have with Mike. What are we going to do about this? And he and mom would talk about it. And then he would ask us kids, well, what do you think? Do you think I need to let him go? Do you think that we should give him another chance, what would you do? So you're already put in the position of management, even though it's just for education. And you just learn to think like that.
And I love that they included you in all of that. And I know that you now have 2 boys, and I'm guessing that you do that with them too. Involve them in that kind of mentality and thought process. Obviously, you come from a very entrepreneurial family, so it will be interesting to see if your boys also follow in your footsteps. We did talk a little bit about the fact that business owners, and of course, I deal with women, often don't see themselves as salespeople. And you had a really interesting response. So why don't you tell us what you told me about how everyone really is in sales?
I tell my kids this, you talking about how I include my boys. I have one little boy who's 10 and we homeschool, and he has his own business. He blows off roofs. So if I'm giving an estimate on one house, he'll go next door, and we live in a very small town, so it's really safe. And he can knock on the door, pitch his services. He has his little invoices. He can do the job. He can collect on it. But he's learning those sales skills too. Now, does he always bill appropriately? No, it is totally a sliding scale. If he likes the person, if he thinks that they need help or they can't afford it, you can see where his heart is in with this. I think he'll eventually one day go into ministry, and I'm really pushing these sales skills with him, because in ministry, if you're a pastor, you are selling. You're selling every day. You have to sell yourself so that people like you, they trust what you're telling them. If you're telling people about how to get saved and about Jesus, you have to sell Jesus. There's not a price tag like at the grocery store, but you have to sell them on the idea of this is what it is, or this is our church, you should come to our church. Those are all sales skills. And we really kind of lose something in not having that mindset because we don't develop those skills at an earlier age like we need to.
You know, that reminds me of a story. When I was a kid, we lived in a new neighborhood, a small area, and one day there was a knock at the door, and it was a pastor who was starting a local church. I totally forgot about that story, but I still remember. His name was Paul Jensen. He said, "I'm starting a church." So yes, he's selling the vision of that church. At that point, it's even, before you're selling Jesus or faith, he's got to get people in that church. That's how he makes his money. That's how he keeps the church going, growing the church. So I think it's really interesting, that take. I've never had anyone bring that up before. So good for you, being really unique. And that you have to sell yourself no matter what you're doing. You mentioned going to chamber meetings, networking. You've got to put yourself out there. And as you talked about too, you have to be different. You have to do things that nobody else will do. Do you have any examples of that come to mind?
When I told my dad I would take over for him, he was like, okay, but your biggest hurdle is going to be you're a woman. People are not going to want to deal with you because you're a woman. To me, that was absurd. My mom and my grandma had done things outside of the scope of what other women did my whole life. And I never realized that it was odd. I know it was different, but it was not odd. It was never a problem. There was never any drama or any pushback over it. So I never even let it enter my mindset that I was going to have those things. Instead, it turned into, I hate to say marketing, because I see so many women that market what they look like versus what they know. And I want people to know that I will do the absolute best job and I'm the most capable. Side note, it was this redheaded lady. They can call the local hardware store and say, hey, I got an estimate 2 years ago. I can't find it. Can't find the contractor's name, but it was this nice redheaded lady. Everybody knows who that is. They're not remembering what I wore, if my makeup was done, what I drove. They're remembering me because it was impressive that I did such a great job. On a side note, I was a woman. And I want that to always be how it is. I'm not clean every day. I'm very hands-on. I like to get up and work with the crew on the roof. I do that a lot. If I'm roofing your house, I'm there 60% of the time. And I think customers appreciate that. because you're sure that I'm checking everything and that it's done to the best of anyone's ability because I'm right there. And it makes you trust me. If you see that I'm capable of this, I'm not there in khaki pants and a dress shirt. You can see that I have been in the trenches. It's a lot easier to trust that person when they say they can do something when you see it, especially me being a woman. Sometimes when I give an estimate, it'll take me the first 10 minutes to prove that I really can do this. But then after that, you have just a few different types of people. Let's say it's a man. I have an option. Either he's really leery of a woman doing this, but he's going to let me try and prove myself. It takes about 10 minutes. And guess what? He's my biggest fan. He's so proud. And I haven't even really done anything yet. It's small things, but he didn't expect it. So it's easier to exceed his expectations. So that's really been beneficial for me. And I can only think of 2 or 3 times in 20-something years that it's ever really been a problem with someone. And I think the couple of times I've been able to gauge that right off the bat and hand it off to somebody else in our company. But there are very, very few times. And I could have pushed and dealt with that customer and everything would have been fine. But I want them to be comfortable. I want them to be comfortable with our company. And part of that is intuitively figuring out who is the best fit to deal with them.
So you have an uncopyable advantage. Of course, that's the name of my book is Uncopyable Sales Secrets. Our whole umbrella for what we do is uncopyable. So you happen to be a redhead, which in this case is a gift. But other salespeople or business owners might have to find that thing that is a cue. And so you can probably see I'm wearing orange. And since I don't have red hair, that is also something that people say, oh, she's the one who wears orange. And if you can have people say something that doesn't apply to everyone else, it's really powerful. I love the fact that you say within a short period of time, you can establish your credibility and get that respect from men. So my background in the early days was selling exhaust systems, and I was one of the very few women that did that. And one of the stories that really put me on the map and differentiated me from other people is that I went into a muffler shop and said, will you teach me how to install a muffler? And so I spent the day in this grimy, greasy muffler shop learning to weld. And that just really showed that I wanted to learn learn the product and what they face every day from their perspective. So the fact that they see you coming out to the jobs, they see you on top of the roof, that is such a great credibility builder, and they know you really care. And I love the fact that you say a lot of times, the men, almost all the time, once you prove yourself, it isn't a problem. Men can be very, very supportive. I think sometimes we put that on ourselves. Do you agree that, oh, the men aren't going to support us? But once you give them the opportunity to see what you can do, they're really helpful and accepting.
In my case, I'd rather sell to a man. He's going to be more interested in the details, and that's how I can really prove myself. That's where my credibility lies in knowing the technical specifications. So if I have a choice, I'd rather sell to a man. I can sell to a woman just fine, but you are going to more go with your gut and then research it online and compare the prices. Whereas with a man, he is going to value the service that I'm providing, and he's going to know how hard it is versus just being dollars and cents, which is what I find more with women.
And do you find sometimes that women are more competitive with each other and maybe not as supportive of each other? That's what I experienced back in the day. My biggest, the biggest, not competitors, but the people that didn't support me were sometimes women. They act like it's a pie that has to be divided up instead of growing the pie. Do you run into that with other women?
I combat it a little bit. I don't wear makeup to work. I am in, work clothes every day. So it doesn't feel competitive with them. I notice a difference if I'm clean. I know that sounds crazy, but I notice a difference if I'm clean. If my makeup is done, it makes it a lot harder because then it's unexpected and they wonder, well, why is she doing this job? They don't know this is my choice, and I love it because they have never had that opportunity to really do something hands-on and see that they can make a difference. And that's the part that I love so much. But usually I'm pretty well known in the community and it's not a problem like that. But once in a while, something comes up.
You've kind of touched already on the things that you do differently, but when you're in sales, you obviously have competition. And so what do you do besides getting in there on the job and establishing your credibility? Do you have any other examples of things that you do differently that other people don't do?
I stand behind my work a lot more than other people do. I know that I am going to be in this community forever. And I tell people when I give them an estimate, the next time I see you, I want to be in the grocery store and I want you to hug my neck because you're so happy with your roof. I never want to see you again because you have a roof issue. But when I see you at the ball field when our kids are playing T-ball, I want you to be so happy and introduce me to your friends. So I really try and establish that long warranty. The standard warranty in our industry is 1 to 3 years, and I offer a 12-year warranty right off the bat. I know how I am. One of my downfalls is that I will not always charge people when I should. So since I know that off the bat, if it's something small, if I come to your house and I fix something, I already have everything in my truck, it doesn't take but a few minutes, I'm not going to charge you. So I may as well extend that warranty and use it as a selling point because I know that I would fix it anyway if it was something that was anyway in my control to do. So I try and combat that part, that downfall of mine as a benefit and extend that warranty where no one else really does that.
Well, and then who are they going to call when they do need a roof, right?
That's right. Mm-hmm.
If you want referrals and you want repeat business, obviously, if someone has a small roof repair, eventually we've had our roof replaced. Everybody has to have a roof replaced, and that's a big job with a big price tag. And so maybe your son is getting that from you. So he might not be charging people as much, but he might see potential, right?
Mm-hmm. And I have roofed plenty of houses that I went to with my dad and did small repairs on, or I remember when my dad roofed it. I've even done some where they remember my grandpa being the last one to work on their house. And then here I am doing an asbestos abatement or whatever kind of job it is there. And then my grandpa was the one to install it. So I feel like it's a lineage of accountability that we will stand behind our work. We will be accountable for what we've done. And people trust us so much because they have saw that through the years that we really will be like that. And I definitely see it in the next generation as well.
Well, one thing that comes across is your enthusiasm for what you do. And I sold mufflers, exhaust systems. It wasn't all that exciting. You might be way more excited about roofing, but it really is all about the relationships. Like you said, if you can go into the grocery store and you can say, hey, we have a relationship, they'll refer you to other people and it's just more meaningful, right? This isn't just business. That's what I'm getting from you. It's not just business. It's your whole attitude.
It is your whole attitude. And everywhere you go, you are a reflection of your business. If you are a business owner, everywhere you go. I gave an estimate on a funeral home 3 years ago during COVID. I hardly had any contact with the people. I never heard anything back from them. Sometimes I let that hurt my feelings a little bit. And I think, well, maybe I didn't do a good job, or maybe I presented them with the wrong product. And I had to recently go to a funeral there. And when I was there, I shook the funeral director's hand and I said, hey, I haven't been in the area. I gave you an estimate a couple of years ago on your roof. I just wanted to introduce you. I'm your roofer. Well, I'm technically not his roofer, but he hasn't had a roofer yet, so I could be. So that's how I introduced myself. And guess what? Guess who's going to be his roofer? It's going to be me, because I didn't give him an option to even think that somebody else could be his roofer. It's just me. We're established. I said that in front of his friends, his coworkers. But things like that, putting things together in a way that people automatically are on your team, I think is so important.
Right. And the best salespeople, I firmly believe, and obviously you do too, are relationship sellers. And of course, there are books out that say The Wolf of Wall Street, or, killing it, or being a closer. And I always think that's not the way I want to be sold. I want to be sold like you are selling, where it's a relationship. You are working to give them the best. And really, it's not only the right thing to do, it's more profitable, right?
Mhm. That's correct. Our family started in 1932. The construction industry has had so many ups and downs since then, and we've been through some hard economies. We've been through some booming times. And our family has never had to lay off a person because we didn't have enough work. And we've never had anyone miss a day of work because we didn't have anything to do. Not one time. The reason is because every time we start getting slow, someone I've told, you know what, ma'am, you don't need a new roof now. Call me in 2 or 3 years, or let me just fix this and get you by. You can budget for it. This is about what it'll cost, and I'll see you down the road in a couple of years. Those people always come through. The Lord always sends those when we start getting slow, and it has just kept us smooth and steady all these years.
And that's a huge credibility builder. I can't even think of a better one than saying, I'm not going to sell this to you because you don't need it. This isn't the right thing for you now. Obviously, that is building trust.
It does. It definitely does.
And they're going to call you.
But I have to trust them that they will call me back too. And I'm not just giving them away to another competitor. But if they are the kind of customer that's going to go to another competitor like that, they're not my people. So it's okay. And that's something I've learned as I've gotten older, that everyone is not my customer. You have to identify your customer. And when you do, I think you call it a moose. It's a lot easier. With me, I can't really target my moose, but it doesn't hurt my feelings the way it did when I was younger, when somebody else shoots my moose and I know it's not the trophy anyway, so it's okay.
And even if you can't target your moose, it sounds like it's very easy for you to tell once you start working with them if they're your moose or not. Because they're not looking for the lowest price or, the quickest job. They're looking for it to be done right. I mean, you have a family business, and one thing that I'm picking up from you too is that you treat your employees really well too. It's a family business, and I'm thinking that you also include them in the family.
So much so that with my children, sometimes I'll have to go give an estimate, and I have several employees that can watch my kids or can come finish supper so that I can do whatever I need to do. And we've always had several at a time people that we can really trust and that are a part of our family, and including them in decisions and things as much as possible, I think is so important to make them feel like part of that team. And then they in turn treat the customer the same, like we're all on the same team, instead of kind of a two-part relationship where you're just trying to benefit off of each other. I don't like that.
Right. And most companies say, who have salespeople, they want their salespeople to treat the customer like gold. But then if the management doesn't treat them like gold, it doesn't pass through. It doesn't make them feel like they want to do that.
I think this is probably a totally separate episode, but I think in any situation where we have sales and service, it's hard to get them to mesh. And then when you introduce a customer also, the customer's met with the salespeople first. The salespeople said, oh, we're the best for this job. Then they're handed off to service, and you're not handing off that relationship as well. It's the sales department's responsibility to set that up so that they also respect the service that is going to be provided and the people who are doing the install or the people who are providing that service. So that's your job, to establish your relationship and how much you respect the next group coming in, so that everything is symbiotic and everyone meshes really well.
Interesting. I just did a program, and it's called The Customer Experience is the Marketing. Everything walks the talk. And it's exactly what you say. It can be the salesperson that goes in and gives the big promise, but then when they're passed off to someone else, if it isn't consistent, that can blow the whole deal.
It can. It really can.
As I told you, this podcast is Uncopyable Women in Sales. This sales advice is, applicable to both women and men, of course. But as we look at women, especially coming from you in a male-dominated industry, What advice would you have for other women who want to be successful in sales?
Absolutely know your product or your service. Whatever you're selling, you have to know it inside and out. You are going to be challenged on it. You're going to have a very short time to prove yourself. Make sure you're not selling that you're a woman more than you're selling your product. The knowledge behind it and the know-how is really, I think, what makes you trustworthy, and a huge benefit. Even if you're doing corporate sales, you want your businesses to trust you and know that you really know what you're talking about. So just do everything you can to learn about the product or whatever you're selling.
And if you weren't a redhead, how would
Mhm.
you set yourself apart? Besides the service, the attitude, the commitment, you have a lot of things going for you that make you unique, but the redhead makes you very memorable. So what would you do if you weren't a redhead?
If I wasn't a redhead, I have a girlfriend who has an insurance business where most people are women. But she has set herself apart with her community service. She's very involved in Rotary and doing things in our community. You know that if there is any kind of a need in the community, she's going to be there. And that's kind of what she's known for. So I would probably pick something like that. Maybe there's a foster center here in town and they always need help building new facilities. I would probably get in on that, or I'd get in on education, like with the high school and teaching kids like mini shop classes. I'd be very interested in doing that. There are plenty of opportunities to set yourself apart other than something that doesn't tie into your career, like my hair or something obvious that would make people trust you.
I agree. And I like to talk about the fact that most products and services really are copyable. People have lots of choices to pick a roofer, but the package that you offer is what makes you uncopyable. So it's, again, commoditized products and services really are about the package that you offer. And you sound like you have a killer package.
Thank you.
And it sounds like you're also involved in your church, correct?
I am. I'm involved in the church, the community. I do things out and about when we can to help, like we were saying with education a lot. There's just so many opportunities to do things, and it's enjoyable when you enjoy the people that you work with.
Sales has such a bad reputation, but if you look at people that have a need for something and you can solve their problem, or in some cases help them achieve their aspiration, sales is wonderful. It's fun, and a lot of women shy away from sales. And I like the encouragement that you're giving that, yes, maybe there's a barrier in the beginning, but if you stick with it and prove yourself, gain that credibility and trust, you can be extremely successful in sales, and you're proof of that.
I'm very competitive. To me, it's such a challenge if I can win over a person, or if I can get a job, if I can get a bid on a job. It's a contest within myself to see if I can do it. And I think so many women are competitive, but when we take out we're competing against someone else and make it against ourselves, I think that's much more motivating than the other way and gives us a better attitude.
That's an excellent point. Really, if you're competing with yourself and you want to get better every day, that is something that will keep you improving all the time. And it doesn't matter as much what your competitors are doing, because say your competitors aren't really doing that great. And if you're better than them, it still doesn't mean a lot. So yeah, one of the women I interviewed recently is a realtor. She has a fascinating story because in her early 20s, she went to prison. And the whole story is, you can find out, I'll tell you how in a minute, but she came out and became one of the top realtors in the Lake of the Ozarks area. And when we first talked, she said there's discussion of having an HGTV special just about Lake of the Ozarks and the realtors. Well, she's their hook. She's a huge hook because she went to prison now she comes out on top. And she really does work hard to find out what the customer needs, find the right property for them. But guess what? She said, you gotta hustle, right?
Mm-hmm.
There is some hustle. So hustle isn't a bad thing. It doesn't mean that you're trying to sell somebody the wrong thing. It just means that you got to be out there, right? You've got to be competitive.
Definitely there.
Do you have any closing thoughts as we say goodbye? Or have we covered everything that you wanted to cover?
I think just don't sell yourself short. There's nothing you can't do. If you put your mind to it and you decide that's a field you want to be in, don't let it scare you away because there are not other women in it. Some of the best welders I know are women. Some of the best mechanics I know are women. Once you start to look, you will see women in those positions. And it's something that if you are interested or your child is interested, let them pursue that career. It's been great for me.
Well, it's been great learning more about your background, your attitude, what has made you so successful, competitive against yourself. All those things feed in together, and they've helped you succeed. And I totally give you kudos and props for that. So, Sara, thank you so much for sharing all of that and being on the Uncopyable Women in Sales podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, and I'll look forward to talking to you again.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Uncopyable Women in Sales, your source for secrets you can use to make more sales. Check the show notes for links and contact information. And if you enjoyed the podcast, please spread the word by subscribing, sharing, and leaving a 5-star review. You can always learn more by going to uncopyablesales.com/podcast. Until next time, go out and supercharge your sales like a true uncopyable rock star.